Hello everyone and welcome back to Habits of a Wealthy Wiz. I'm a nerd called Ninja, your humble host, and as always we're joined by the rich, powerful, and not so humble life mage Tiffany. Say hi, Tiff. This is part 2 of our tutorial on how to get rich with gardening, the episode the internet's been clamoring for. Moving on. Today we're going into more detail about the setup of the garden itself, as well as the pros and cons for doing so. First, the garden's dimensions. Right now you're looking at 134 stinkweed plants. Now let's talk about how many plants are in each row. Starting from right to left, first we have a row of 3, then a row of 7, a row of 9, another row of 9, a smaller row of just 4 that creates the path down the middle, then a row of 9, a row of 9, a row of 8, 6, and then finally a row of 3 on the other end. These numbers will also be left in the description below for easy reference. Of course, if you want to be really sneaky, you could dig plots down the center path, so you could still walk down it, but also make use of it at the same time. Now these numbers may seem pretty random, but hey, that's just how it worked out. In fact, as I aim a large power, Tiff will do a lap around it, and you can see that it just barely fits the garden. I'm sorry. Now let's talk about what you'll need to maintain the garden, as well as how much it costs to set it up. Farley here is the game's first gardening trainer. He can teach you the pest control power you'll need. You can find him at Golem Court in Wizard City. His cousin Marley here has the large area of effect water spell you'll need. He hangs out with the rest of the vendors in the starting area of Mushu. So the pest control power you need, Gusty Winds, costs 1,000 gold to learn and 10 energy to use. The water spell Downpour costs 5,000 gold and 15 energy to use. In total, you'll be spending 6,000 gold in your training cost and using 25 energy every day to maintain one section of the garden. If you have 2 sections, you'll be using 50 energy every day, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about the rest of the cost of setting this garden up. Small pots cost 220 gold each in the bazaar, and stinkweed seeds cost 480 each. So 220 gold times 134 plants equals 29,480 gold for the pots. 480 gold per seed times 134 equals 64,320 gold. For a grand total of 98,800 gold, give or take a few based on supply and demand. Now I can hear you asking me, yo, Ninja, what's going on here? You're supposed to be teaching us how to make money, not spend it. Well, it's alright, just calm down, I'm getting there, dude. There are steps you can take that will bring these costs down to almost nothing. First, let's talk about the pots. Now, I personally chose to use jars rather than digging individual plots for 2 reasons. First, I'm a crowns player, not a subscriber, which means I have a more limited energy resource to work with. I was also significantly lower level at the time, which compounded the problem. Second, I realized if I ever needed to move the garden, it would be easier to just pick the jars up and set them down somewhere else rather than using up my energy resource digging a whole new set of plots. However, if you choose to use your energy instead of spending your gold, then that's one big part of your setup cost that's been taken out of the equation. Now the seeds themselves. See, the beautiful thing about stinkweed is that they self-replicate. Not only do they automatically reproduce themselves at the end of their life cycle, but as I demonstrated in my first video, they also produce extra seeds throughout the middle of their life cycle. So you don't have to go out and buy 100 of them. You could start small with like 5 or 10. And then 10 turns into 20, 20 into 40, and before you know it, you'll have more than you know what to do with. So there you go, I just saved you $98,000. If only I were this good with money in real life. Now I've demonstrated how using this strategy can earn you tons of money for your character. But so what, right? I mean, most gardens provide reagents or snacks that you could sell to earn cash, so what makes this so special? Well, most skeptical one, it's because the bulk of the money you'll receive from this garden comes from treasure cards. And that is a very important detail because treasure cards are the only things you can trade to somebody else. It's the one item you can possess that's of value to another player. which means not only will you be rolling in the dough, but you'll also have the power to spread some of that wealth around to your friends. Maybe you have a friend who's new to the game. Well, here you go. This will help you get started. Don't mention it. Maybe you really want to hatch with your friend, but they're a little short on money. Well, don't worry about it. I got you covered. Now let's talk about the negatives of this strategy, because there are a few, and it's only fair that I mention them. For those of you who may not know, every house in this game has an item limit, which is exactly what it sounds like, a limit to how many items you can have in any given space. Now typically for the biggest, most expensive houses in the game, the item limit is 250. Here you can see mine's at 300, but we'll cover that in a second. It's also important to note that when you're dealing with gardening, each plant counts as 2 items, because it registers the seed and the plot it grows in as 2 separate items. So under normal circumstances, the most plants you could have in any given area is 250 divided by 2, which is 125. But there are ways around this. Now I personally chose to buy bric-a-brac elixirs out of the Crown shop. These increase your item limit by 50, which is how I got up to an even 300. But this isn't for everyone, and there are other ways. You could split the garden up, put half inside, half outside, or use 2 separate houses altogether. Really just whatever way is best for you. Now the biggest downside, for me at least, was the experience points. Stinkweed is one of the very first plants you get access to, and as such they give the minimum amount of experience points. That's 2 points during a normal harvest and 20 points during their final harvest. Even in huge numbers like we have here, that doesn't add up to very much. Compare that to the oh-so-popular Evil Magma Pea, which grants the maximum amount of experience, and you'll see you'd actually get more XP just from a single Evil Magma Pea than you would this entire stinkweed plantation put together. So if you haven't maxed out your gardening skill yet, and that's something that's important to you, don't use stinkweed, because it's never going to happen for you. Max out your skill first, and then switch into stinkweed later on if it's something you're interested in trying for yourself. Speaking of switching gardens, this brings us to the last thing I'm going to teach you about today. I call it garden hibernation. This is the same garden as it looks today. Each and every plant is elder, which means it's reached the end of its life cycle and is waiting to be harvested one last time. While in their elder form, the plants no longer require any maintenance of any kind. They just sit there, waiting, forever and ever. This has allowed me to more easily move on to other gardening projects. And while Tiff and I certainly do miss having an infinitely renewable source of income, here the garden sits, just waiting for me to start it back up again as soon as the need arises. Now what could possibly pull me away from all this money? Well, that and more will be revealed in future episodes of the show. So be sure to subscribe so that you can stay in the know, give this video a like, and share it with every wizard player you know. Tiff, anything you want to add? Truer words were never spoken. We're going to leave you with the sound of 134 stinkweed plants, now preserved for all time, so prepare yourself. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Habits of a Wealthy Wiz. She's Tiffany and I'm Ninja, signing out.